Rick, I want to start by saying you forgot more than I've known, but in reading up in the last few weeks, the prescience of the founders to have the foresight, not just about the possibility of a man like Trump, but also foreign interference, the importance of the checks and balances, etc. It's unbelievable, to me at least, that they could have looked that far ahead and imagined the real threats to obviously a democracy in its infancy.
You know, that Alexander Hamilton quote that Adam Schiff opened his presentation with is just remarkable, right? You're listening and you're thinking all along, yes, that's Donald Trump. Yes, that's Donald Trump. Yes, that's Donald Trump. Well, these guys weren't operating in a vacuum. They didn't just sit around in a room and dream up the Constitution. It was based on history. One of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention, John Dickinson, said, "Experience must be our only guide. Reason should not mislead us." So they were basing this on their own American colonial experience under British rule, under British history. They went all the way back to the ancients, to Greek and Roman history. So they were basing this on a lot of history, and they had a very profound understanding of human nature. And the whole Constitution was based on trying to make human nature work in favor of self-government rather than against self-government, which is what had usually been the case in the past. They were going to have a balance of power between the Congress and the judiciary and the executive branch so that they could work ambition against ambition, as the founders like to say.
Well, and there was that immortalized moment when Ben Franklin walked out of the Constitutional Convention, and he was asked by the public, well, what kind of government do we have? And very possibly they could have come up with a monarchy or whatever else, but he said, you have a republic if you can keep it. To that end, Rick, if the Founding Fathers were able to eyewitness what is going on right now, first in the House and now the Senate, where you have a party almost as a monolith, willingly acceding their check and balance authority and their co-equal branch status, and allowing a president, in this case Trump, to have outsized authorities without anybody being able, even though they're empowered to do so, to be a stopgap. What would the Founding Fathers have said? I imagine they'd be like, what the heck are you guys doing? We gave you the tools to prevent this very moment, and you're just handing it over to one branch.
Well, here's one of the ways in which the Founding Fathers were not actually as prescient as we would have wished them to be. Because while they predicted that there would always be factionalism, they did not predict the rise of a two-party system. So when the founders were writing the Constitution, they thought that the members of the Congress would be feeling free to stand up to the president. They really weren't thinking that, oh, the president could be of the same party as the majority in both the House and the Senate, and that could really screw up this impeachment power. That is the problem that we've got. In the past two impeachments, you had the president was of one party and the Congress was of another party. So that made it much more likely that you were going to have ambition set against ambition. Here, in this case, we've got the Congress and the presidency both being held by the same party, or at least the Senate being held by the same party as the presidency. And that has bollocked things up terribly because they feel more loyal to their party, apparently. And it seems that way almost every day, where the Republicans are ignoring the facts and actually working hand in glove with the president during this impeachment process, as opposed to just sitting back, listening to the facts, and trying to make a judgment. Democracy doesn't work if the politicians we put in charge don't have their first loyalty to the truth. If their first loyalty is to their party, then we're all in big trouble.
Clearly, the founders were concerned about an executive getting too much power. And I'm going to quote here from George Mason. He said, "Shall any man be above justice? Shall the man who has practiced corruption, and by that means procured his appointment in the first instance, be suffered to escape punishment by repeating his guilt?" To that end, the president said, Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nothing could ever happen to me. Is this the very nightmare the founders worried about, that even with the parameters they set up for this new republic, that the president was going to be able to amalgam unchecked power, and if a legislator wouldn't rein him in or her in, then they'd have the very thing that they fled England from?
This was exactly, you've got it exactly right. This was what the whole question hanging over the Constitutional Convention was. Under the Articles of Confederation, the government that we set up at the time of the American Revolution, we didn't really have a strong executive. We had a Congress that was totally in charge. And this government proved incompetent to governing the United States. So the founding fathers set out at the Constitutional Convention to redress that problem. And what they came up with was a tripartite government, right, with an executive, a judiciary, and a Congress. And the problem is that some of them thought that the presidency would be too strong. George Mason was one of those. He was really worried about it, which is why he pushed for impeachment. He said, we've got to have a power where the Congress can call back the president of the United States if he oversteps the boundaries of power and what he should be doing.
And finally, obviously, the founders foresaw the real threats with foreign involvement in our elections. But the one thing I took away, Rick, is that they never looked at the moment they were in as the only time prison to consider. They were thinking about future administrations. They were thinking about the survival of a democracy, but also how history would judge them. And that's one thing, as I'm watching lawmakers in the Hill, particularly Republicans, the lack of concern, it seems, for, well, what happens in 5 years? What happens in 10 years? How will history look at the vote I'm about to cast? There's a real distinction in terms of the foresight, at least then, versus what we're seeing now.
There was a historian by the name of Doug Adair many years ago who wrote a wonderful essay which later formed the basis for a book called Fame and the Founding Fathers. And what he explained was that back in the era of the Founding Fathers, fame didn't mean celebrity. Fame meant thinking about the future, thinking about your legacy. And the Founding Fathers were committed to thinking about the legacy that they left for their children, grandchildren, and really for the future. And when they said the future, they're thinking future in terms of hundreds and hundreds of years. They were trying to establish something that was going to last for the ages. And this really did drive their thinking during the drafting of the Constitutional Convention. It doesn't mean that they weren't politicians. There were all kinds of political compromises that had to be made between Northerners and Southerners, between merchants and planters, and other classes of ordinary Americans at the Constitutional Convention. But far and above over that, they were concerned about their future. They wanted fame, and they got it. Here we are 250 years later or so. We are still talking about the Founding Fathers. We revere the Founding Fathers. And we've established temples in Washington, D.C. to the Founding Fathers. There's a reason for that. Yep. I don't think there's going to be anybody establishing temples to the politicians who are running things now, and that's a problem.
I fully expect our current president's going to see if he can get some space on Mount Rushmore, but we'll see how that shakes out. I kid, but hopefully I'm wrong. Rick Shenkman, great job. I appreciate it as always. Thank you for the time.
All right. Thank you.